Roblox Doors is just one of those games that has such a deep and complex background story. I mean, why were we all placed within the hotel? Who exactly are some of these entities? And when does the game even take place at all? But many within the community have created major theories on the game. These are Doors theories that will blow your mind. Our first theory does come within the official Doors Discord server, and it does involve with our buddies El Goblino and Bob the Skeleton. Jim states Doors theory. What if El Goblino, Bob? When you interact with Bob, he does nothing, he doesn't move at all. Plus, there's flies all around him, meaning that he is dead. I mean, it makes sense considering the fact that Bob is just a bunch of bones and apparently skeleton remains. The guy doesn't even move around at all and does nothing whenever you interact with it. Whenever El Goblino mentions about Bob, such as their strong kick, they could be referring to them back in the day when they were alive once again, which actually led to another theory being created by the game theorists. Especially since El Goblino did mention that they had seen one of those sparkly thingies, but it wasn't blue.
You see, on one of the desks in rooms you can find this, a purple key card that you can't pick up or interact with. Making it even more suspicious is the fact that nowhere in this game do you need to use a key card. I mean, this immediately set off my theorist senses. This key card does, however, make an appearance somewhere else, in another Roblox game created by NicoRocks5555, a horror game called, get this, Bob is Missing, where you work through a series of creepy scenes in order to rescue your friend Bob. If you manage to rescue him and get the game's good ending, you and Bob exit through a bright white tunnel, one very reminiscent of the glowing white doors that we see in room A1000's void. This, I think, has given us Bob's complete story. He's the common thread here. He's dimension hopping throughout these various connected worlds. He disappears and Bob is missing, he gets rescued, and he winds up leaving through a portal that spits him out in rooms. He brings along his purple key card, which is how it winds up on one of the desks. Now stuck in rooms with nowhere to go, he gets a job and works in the office for a bit. Eventually, he's forced to leave when the entities start showing up. Forced to escape through one of the many exit doors that spawn after A200, he winds up in the Doors Hotel, lost in its ever-changing hallways. Eventually, he comes across El Goblino, who, like any good duende, guides those who are lost. Tired of constantly getting lost and having to run away from monsters, Bob decides to stay in the safe room until his death, eventually decomposing into a silent pile of bones.
That's probably the craziest door theory I've heard in quite a while, to be honest. But it is the best one we have pertaining to Bob and his massive backstory. But that's not all. MadPat and their channel had yet another major theory, especially when dating back to the history and creation of the hotel.
The Infirmary. Why on earth would there be an infirmary in a hotel? I'll tell you why. It's because that's exactly what hotels were used for during the 1940s, especially during World War II. During the war, the country was in need of more hospitals for fairly obvious reasons, but they didn't want to have to build a bunch of new hospitals that would then become useless at the end of the war. So instead, they started working with private businesses to turn their establishments into makeshift hospitals, and hotels were candidate number one for this sort of thing. They had lots of elevators to transport patients and equipment, they had lots of rooms for people to stay in, and best of all, because of the war, people weren't traveling or going on vacation, so the hotels were largely going unused. So while it seems weird to see an infirmary in a hotel, it's actually not outside the realm of possibility. That, plus the 40s style of furniture, tells us that what we're exploring here is a haunted hotel that was an active hospital during World War II. And given the monsters roam the hallways and the damage that we see across various rooms, it's unlikely that anyone has occupied this place since.
Again, MadPat once again strikes it home. The whole entire hotel of the game does give off a classic styled vibe similar to the 1940s that they've mentioned within their video. I mean, have you noticed that there aren't any TVs or relatively anything current gen within the game? All we have are lighters, candles, and also generic flashlights, especially since flashlights were invented and were widely used in around the 1920s to 1940s. Though wowzers did state that MadPat may not have been 100% correct in their lore so far, it may just be the closest theory we have to solving the entire game's backstory. We do have even more crazy theories, especially when it comes to Null's YouTube channel. They have also created a short theory video talking about the lore of the Hotel Plus update, this time focusing more on the lumps of the strange festering mystery meat around the hotel. Let's take a listen.
As of Doris' new update, past door 50, you can find these weird orange, red, and brown piles of something thrown all across the rooms, often in ones that appear to have taken damage in some sort of way. Now, some have assumed that these are just rocks or something, but I believe they are something far more sinister. I think that these are the actual pieces of flesh that the figure was created out of. Now, obviously, once again referring back to Game Theory's video, MatPat theorized that the figure is a homunculus, created out of the flesh and bones of some thing. Not only are both figure and the mounds the same general color and texture, but the Doors developers went the extra mile to add flies around these mounds. And where's the only other place you can find flies and doors? Around the dead corpse of Bob. So if figure is indeed a homunculus, like MatPat says he is, this is further proof to that theory.
Again, Null does bring up some good points. We have confirmed that these piles of stuff are officially known as festering meat within the game's classified files, and the figure does indeed look like to be created from these random droppings. Actually, Wowzers did confirm this relatively recently, that the only entity that is relatable to these piles is figure, which does further prove that the figure's composition would actually come from all these piles of meat lying around the hotel. I wonder if that also means that the figure is one stinky boy as well. I mean, it could all be a possibility, but Buckdog has a very interesting idea when it comes to the game. I personally think that Doris is a simulation, with the guiding light being in control somehow, with the rooms being a blind spot instead of having the yellow one. And to support this theory, many entities have glitch effects or are pixelated, and El Goblino even is aware that you can die and simply go again. I mean, he's not wrong. El Goblino does say that within the Jeff shop. It just seems to be this huge fourth wall reference that comes out of nowhere from the little goblin. It's also pretty interesting how some people were saying that the guiding light and the curious light could have also been workers within the hotel or possibly even the rooms. DD Shun Shun does mention this within their amazing artwork of both entities together. But could the same be said with most of the entities within the game? Could they have all been previous workers of the hotel before something catastrophic happened and caused them to transform? It could go even deeper than this, especially with all of the new secrets and hidden features being found throughout the various parts of the hotel, such as the claws on the wall to those piles of festering meat. Well, it's time to hear your theories down below and discuss.